prepare ourselves. If you get ready, put your hand over your eyes. I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
And your ears, I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
And over your heart, and just extend out your arms. I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
The spiritual truth that I'm working with today is that change is a choice. Change is a choice. Now, the kind of change that I'm talking about is the only change any of us have any authority over, and that is the change within ourselves. I'm not talking about changing conditions out there. Sometimes that will happen once we change inside, then the conditions outside will begin to shift and move and rock in a different way. But you know, I'm reminded of what Byron Katie once said. She said, there are three kinds of business in the world. There's your business, there's my business, and there's God's business. And 90% of the business on the planet is the business of God. It's not our business. But what is our business is how we can change. Change is a choice. Now, I want to make sure, because that's powerful spiritual medicine. And as I often say, whenever we are in the company of powerful spiritual medicine, we must take it with great care. We must be aware of what it is, how powerful it is. You wouldn't take chemotherapy without being aware of what it is and being mindful as you use it. You should not use this particular spiritual principle, this particular spiritual medicine, without being mindful how you use it. This is for us to use on us only. It's not us to use on someone else. I'm reminded of a friend of mine who was going through some really painful stuff on the externals of her life, and she was grieving as a result of being in this painful stuff. And the person that she was talking to, perhaps as some kind of a misguided motivational statement, said, well, you know, change is choice. You can make the choice to change. Of course, that's true. But the truth of the matter also is we need time to grieve serious things, and we need to be in the presence of those people who can handle it. You only want to share your grief with people who are mature enough to be able to be witnessing it in love and in support, not people who are trying to fix you all of a sudden. That's for later down the road. But the truth is, later down the road, change is a choice. You know, and I actually, you know, we can't change for anybody else. You can't change for your spouse. You can't change for your best friend. You can't change for your mother or your father or anybody else. You can't even change for your bank account. You can't change for anything or anybody else that's outside of you. Now, nobody can drag you kicking and screaming through the process of change. But you might have to drag yourself kicking and screaming through the process of change. I actually have a black belt in resisting change in my life. It took me years of falling off bar stools before I could say, you know, get help with the help of God and my fellows, that I could become a servant of God instead of a drunk. It took me even longer, more years, before I could stop making cupcakes my higher power and turn to universal love in my life. That took a lot longer for me in my life. See, change is a choice, but you have to make it. Nobody else can make it for you. And changing and choice are not for quick fixers. The kind of choice I'm talking about is not quick fix choice. You know, quick fix choices they're rewarded with interruptions in behaviors, but they aren't long lasting. You might stay sober for 3 days. You might be the 5th person at the potluck line instead of the very first person at the potluck line. But changes, for longer lasting change, is the kind of change I'm talking about in our lives. The change I'm talking about today takes time. It takes time. I've been working with 6 spiritual practices in my own life to try and ease the pain of change. Change takes time. it takes effort, it takes persistence. So I'm going to really run through these 6 because I want to get back and hear some more healing sounds. But I'm going to run through these 6 spiritual practices that you and I can use in order to bring greater change into our life. The first is that if we want to, the first one is you have to get still. You have to get still, and you have to make the decision to change. It's your change. You have to make that decision. Now, here's what happens. Don't underestimate yourself and your ability to make change. You are a representation of the presence of God on this planet, and there is nothing God can't do through you. Amen. Amen. You are a representation. Here's what happens, though. In order for us to be able to make this conscious change, we have to sit down, get still, and decide we want to make it. Now, if you want to make a change. You say, okay, I want to make a change. I want to stop being late to everything. Let's just use an easy one. For some people, I want to stop being late to everything, okay? That's the decision you make. You make it consciously. You speak it into your mind. You speak it out loud. You want to up your success ante? Write it down. Write it down and put it somewhere where you can see it a lot. See, if I want to move from victim to victory over people, places, and things, I want to move from victim to victory over addiction, over a wandering eye, over procrastination. I want to move from victim to victory over putting too much stuff on my credit card. I want to move from victim to victory about how much TV I watch during a day and what kind of TV that is. I want to move from victim to victory about how I treat my kids and my spouse. Write it down. Make a decision, write it down, and put it where you can see it every single day. See, now here's the thing. Once you do that, do not get blindsided by trying to figure out how it's going to happen. Forget about that. Write it down and let God do God's work. What happens is we try and figure out how God would ever make this happen. See, there are so many miracles that could be happening in our lives, what we call miracles and what God calls all in a day's work. There are so many of these miracles that could be happening in our life, but we sabotage them because we try and figure out God's game plan. And once we get in that, once we get our own little chalkboard out and try and help God's game plan, we've actually put up the wall for success in our life. So put out there what it is that we want. See, your job is to allow the success. It's to allow God to work through you, not to work for God. But we give up because we failed before at this particular thing we wanted. And because we failed before, we just assume we're going to fail again. And if we can't figure out how God would work through us, then we've really put up the walls in our lives. The second spiritual practice is, after you make the decision, you have to decide if you are ready. You have to decide if you're ready. And if you're ready, then you move into making a movie. Now, I talk about this a lot. We are no longer snapshots in this life. We are movies. And if you want to be successful, you have to start making blockbusters of how life would be after, not during the change process, after the change has happened. That's where your movie belongs. What will I be wearing? Who will I be hanging out with? How much money will I be making? What will make me happy? How will my kids be living their lives? That's where you go with that. And you want to there's two things that you want to do with your movie. You want to make the details of the movie, and then you want to put emotion into it. Now, if you don't have good emotion after you make your movie, you know how you go to some movies and you're filled with emotion as a result of seeing it? The reason you're filled with emotion is because the writer, the editor, and the director paid attention to the details. See, if you're not feeling emotion in your movie, you need to go back and work on the details of your movie. And when you work on, Ernest Holmes says this. He says, there are two things in a good prayer. And let me tell you, your movie is a prayer. Ernest Holmes says there are two things needed for good prayer. One of them is technique. Those are your details. And the other is fire. That's your emotion. You need those two things in order to successfully make change. Now remember, the key here is this movie is after it's happened, not during the change process. So you want to approach your movie as if you are an editor, and you just keep cutting out on the cutting room floor. If it's not bringing up emotion, the detail's wrong, cut it out. Leave it on the cutting room floor. Go back to making your movie in Technicolor because you're making a blockbuster. The third spiritual practice is to get your ego in check. Get it in check. Now notice I'm not saying smash your ego. We are not a smash your ego congregation. Your ego has been your friend for many, many years and will continue to be your friend. Your ego has helped you map out where you want to go. It's protected you. It's motivated you. And that's a good thing. You give thanks to your ego. But now you're here and you know you have God. And that God is not outside of you, but inside of you. And so all of the things you depended on your ego to do, now you get to depend on your higher self to do. The God to do, to motivate you, to help you, to keep you from being hurt in your life. That's what your higher power does. Ego feeds perfection. The reason we need to get rid of the ego is it feeds perfection. And if you are gripped in perfection, you will not change. You cannot change if you are gripped in perfection. We give up. We give up because you know what? We're perfect. And if we made a mistake, we're not going to keep going. We're just going to give up in our life. See, the thing is, you didn't learn to walk without failing. You didn't learn to ride a bike without failing. You weren't perfect when you first drove your car. There's not a parent in the room who's taught their child how to drive who didn't have Tums right by their car seat as they were teaching, because their kids weren't perfect as they learned to drive. If you've ever taken Zumba, I took Zumba once, and very humbling experience. You are not perfect. If you do Zumba, you are not perfect in your life. You have to be able to be willing to make mistakes, to look like a fool in order to be able to be a changed person. And here's the thing, a changed condition can only happen to a changed individual in your life. The fourth one is begin to search for God in form to help you. This is not a Lone Ranger activity. You need another person, and if you're like me, you need a posse of people who will begin to help you through this change. But you have to be careful. You have to be careful about who it is that you ask, because not everybody is ready for you to change. Some people, family and friends, they want that snapshot that they had. They want you to be angry. They want you to be limited. They want you to have the same poverty consciousness, perhaps, that they have. They like that. Misery loves company. And you have to kind of move away from that. Be careful who you're asking. I'm blessed. I'm blessed to have found a program of recovery, several of them, in fact, in which I could go and find my posse. But you can find a posse too. If you don't know one person who you can ask for help, and here's the kind, I'm going to get really specific here now because we are a congregation that understands that inspiration without application is what? Hallucination. We're not going to hallucinate. We're going to actually become change agents. And so the kind of person that you want or people that you want are people who will allow you, a person who will allow you to call them once every single day. And the phone call is no longer than 2 minutes. And what it is this. Here is the change I want to make. I want to stop being a victim to my partner's anger all the time. I want to do that. That's the change I want to make. Here is what might get in the way of it today. Maybe you want to have a more harmonious time at work. You know, you want to go into your job and not be talking about people behind their back. That's your change. That's what I want to do. You call your person every day and you say, my change is I want to be less gossipy at work, and here's what might get in the way of that today. Okay, very simple. Now, what your change partner is going to do is just witness it. Not going to give you any advice, not going to tell you what to do, not going to do any of that. Now, we have something for you today. If you know your change partner, or you know somebody you can ask to be your change partner, and you trust them with your vulnerability, because you're going to have to be vulnerable in order to do this. You can't be, I'm Miss Everything or Mr. Everything. You have to say, I don't know how to do something. If you're willing to do that and you don't know who you want, we have pages back there in Brooks Hall, and they're called Partnership Change Pages. You just write your name down, and by 6 o'clock tonight, I will have contacted you with a partner who says, yes, I'm willing to be called every day. Now look, if you're a person who just wants to get, don't go back there. Call a practitioner. That's what they're for. If to sign up, you have to be willing to give and get with a partner. But we want you to do that because, hearing about this is just hearing about it. We want you to really hear it and begin to work with it in your life. Here's the rules. No advice, no advice, no advice, no advice. That's the rule. You're just listening. You're just listening. Okay, number 5, develop a willingness to let go of people. Sometimes you're going to have to let go of some people. You're not responsible for anybody else's happiness, and they're not responsible for your happiness. Sometimes you have to let go of people, and what we ask you to do is let go of them with love. Let go of them with respect. Bless them and release them. Doesn't mean you'll never see them again. Doesn't mean you won't be friends again. But right now you're going in the hallway. You're in the hallway of change. Once you get to the arena, once you get to the movie theater and your blockbuster is playing, you can invite them back into your life because you'll be stronger. But when you're in the hallway of change, sometimes it's a narrow passage and you have to let people go while you're going through it. Number 5 is let drama go out of your life. Let drama go out of your life. No drama in your life. And that's hard for us because we like a little juice, don't we? We like a little juicy stuff in our life. Yeah. So here's the thing. While you're going through change, while you're in the hallway, feel the little juice need come on up, get in touch with one of the soap operas on TV or get a thriller or something like that. But don't let your life become the soap opera. Get your juice in another way in your life. One of the tenets of science of mind is that God is in and through all of creation, but never absorbed by creation. God is in and through all of creation, but never absorbed by creation. And what they're saying is that God doesn't get in your drama. See, God doesn't get hooked up into how puny the lilies of the field might be in a certain area. God doesn't get all hooked up in anybody's stuff. God doesn't get hooked up in why work isn't good for you. God doesn't get hooked up in that. In fact, Ernest Holmes would say, why is an invalid question. Just move on. It's not good for me. What can I do to fix it? But don't get absorbed in the drama at work. And the last one is cultivate forgiveness of yourself. Cultivate forgiveness of yourself. Don't drag your past mistakes into the premiere of your blockbuster. Don't drag them in there. Let them go. Work to let them go. Now, here is the thing. We have one of the brightest and most successful facilitators of workshop in this church. And next week, 2 weeks from now, she is doing a workshop on forgiveness. And that's Tanya Beverly, our ministerial intern, Tanya Beverly. Yeah. Now look, treat yourself to this workshop. Don't wait until you have a big old thing that you have to forgive. Get the skills to forgive before the trespass happens. It's perfectly okay to learn the skills of forgiveness before you're knocked down. But if you're knocked down, then you really want to be there. If you've got somebody who's just, harassing you in your life, up here, you want to be at that workshop. Flyers are everywhere for that. See, one of the changes that most of us want to make is to stop judging other people. Isn't it? Wouldn't you say that's true? Because that brings us closer to God. If we can stop judging everybody else. And that, change, for that to change is we don't want to worry about what other people are doing. We just want to stop reacting ourselves. That's our work in forgiving and not forgetting. We can't forget. Oh, that whole phrase, forgive and forget, that's the most ridiculous thing in the world. You're never going to forget it, but you can forgive it and put it in a new perspective, put it on a different shelf in your life. Change can be stressful. Change can be stressful, but all of us, every single one of us who are a representation of God on this planet can change. Let's take this message into prayer. Knowing that there is only one power, it's the power of love. And it runs through us all of the time. It never dams up. It just keeps running through us and running through us and running through us. This power of love. I give thanks for that. I release this word into the law, and together we say, and so it is.